Hey guys. While normally the tone we try to set is that of casual friends talking about ostensibly frivolous things, we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge some of what is happening in the world right now.
While we've always tried to steer away from the political, to dismiss systemic racism as purely political just feels dishonest. Black Lives Matter.
We stand with those who seek justice in unfortunately unjust times. There's not much we can do directly with this podcast about a card game, but we hope everyone is staying safe and standing up for what they believe in.
We hope that in these trying times, you find us to be the bastion of camaraderie and ridiculousness that we've always tried to be. Thank you for listening.
Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the episode. I'm Sean. Joining me tonight are my friends, my pals, my buddies, mis amigos. Let's start with Nick. Hey Nick.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay.
That's excellent.
I'm happy to be recording. I'm happy to be on the podcast.
Yeah, we missed a week, and I was glad that I was able to make the makeup, because I wasn't going to be able to make the original.
Yeah, I didn't expect to have a full, well, spoiler alert, full crew after what just happened for one of our hosts. More at 11.
Yeah, we'll get there in 2 seconds here. Ian, hey Ian.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I am, I wish we could have our usual witty repartee, but I'm kind of a big ball of emotions given everything that's been happening in our country and world. And if you're listening to this not live, then there'll be... you've heard our opening message, but yeah, I am angry, sad, but also inspired and hopeful in some ways. So let's see where this goes.
There are worse kaleidoscopes of emotion to be going through, so glad you're with us.
Yes, I am here.
And also, surprisingly, as Nick alluded to, with us is Scott. And Scott,
Hi.
Your family just got added upon, did it not?
It did. It got a fourth action, if you will, in its turn of 3 actions. Yeah, my wife and I had a daughter 4 days ago. Pretty much on the night that we were supposed to podcast, which, my daughter arrived at 1 a.m, so I still could have made the show had we continued.
Coming to you live from the emergency room. Or from the, whatever it is. I don't know.
Delivery room?
Delivery room, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but, on account of, staying married, I chose to stay with my wife and not record a podcast.
Fair.
But yeah, no, things have been great. She's amazing. She's healthy. She came 2 weeks early, but yeah.
Well, I'm very happy that everyone came out happy and healthy, because that was, I won't lie, it was a little bit of an anxiety-producing message that you sent that night. It was like, 2 weeks, I hope everything's okay. So, very big congratulations, and I hope your next few nights have some rest in them, because that's usually a challenge.
Not likely. Yeah.
We've got a fun show for you guys tonight. We've got our normal check-ins. And then as a point of discussion tonight, we're going to tackle a topic that somehow we've managed never to tackle directly on its face before.
What is Arkham?
It's almost that basic. That's a joke, but it's like half a joke.
It's funny because someone asked me, like, hey, have you ever done a show on this topic? And I was like, surely we have. And
We've done
I
like
asked
3.
you guys, and everyone's like, I think so. And then I went back through every single episode. So this is a handy little tool we're going to put out very soon. Every single episode with the main topic. Every single one. And I was like, holy crap, we haven't done this topic. So,
and what is that topic,
there you
Scott?
go. Solo.
Solo
Playing solo. Like,
How?
possibly?
How is that possible?
I don't know. But the thing is, we've touched on it in so many places, right? Like, oh, this card isn't good in solo. This investigator is good solo. I wouldn't take this card in solo, right? Like, we've talked about around it, but we've never, like, full on put one topic together altogether.
And the card pool's in a very, very fruitful place right now, so I'll be interested to see how the concept of solo, particularly deck building, has maybe changed from where we would have been had we had this conversation in episode 5, like we probably should have.
Well, yeah. I think it's the message would change from episode 5 to now.
Yeah,
We'll be very well informed
as far as viability of solo.
that's entirely fair.
Yeah.
All right, and then of course we'll round it out with some tentacle time. But before we do any of that, dudes, what y'all been playing? If anything. Well, I know crazy times are crazy times.
We finished up our TNA Skids and Daisy run.
We sure did. And it was...
Finally, that's
goddamn, that was an epic campaign. You know what's really funny is I finally started enjoying that goddamn deck as we in the last scenario of that goddamn campaign.
I know.
I bitched about how half baked that deck was through the entire campaign, and then in the last game it actually works. I'm like, oh fuck, I want to play this again.
Yeah, so we took on the Return to the Devour Below, and I don't even know if saying we steamrolled it is strong enough. Because that felt like we went for a walk in the park. There may have been some bad guys along the way. Yeah. And then we stopped some kind of ritual going on. Was there something going on here, guys?
I don't know. There's some candles kicked over.
Yeah, wow. It was...
There was a pig roasting over the bonfire. I just ate it. It was cool.
I really did love that campaign because I actually got to play with a lot of... the rewards you get from
you picked standalones. Up. How many cards did you actually add to your deck from that campaign?
Oh,
8?
A lot.
Was it close to
At
8?
Least.
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah, I'll check. I'll get back to you. But here,
I personally had 2 or 3, and then I upgraded my signature because of Read or Die. Yeah, you had an obscenely large deck by the time we got done.
8 cards I added.
Wow.
My deck was 45 cards total. So 5 of those were permanents. So 40 cards above. Yeah.
Wow.
Because I added 3 extra weaknesses, plus the Bloodstained Dagger, plus Bauta, plus John and Jesse Burke, plus Lita Chandler, plus the Kopesh.
Yeah, that's right, in the Kopesh. Oh, that was fun.
Oh, the Kopesh is a blast.
Kopesh did work. Anyway,
yeah.
So that campaign's done. Our next campaign that will start at some point, I assumed it was going to be a while, but Scott's ambitious AF, so here we are. I think we were thinking TCU?
I think
it was either going to be TCU or it was going to be we're going to do both sides of a Dream Eaters campaign before Nick and Ian get to their next scenario.
Yeah, that was the...
I'm not even mad.
That's accurate. It's very accurate.
I think for the sake of sanity, I prefer TCU.
Sure.
Just, I don't know, I like playing a single deck and watching it evolve a little more. Especially for people watching, they probably appreciate that more. But
And did we decide investigators yet?
Well, I know you were leaning Yorick.
I was looking at Yorick, but now that Drake's out, I kind of really want to try Drake. So,
because I was leaning Luke.
That's right. Okay, yeah, I can stick with Yorick. I can stick with Yorick.
We could do Luke,
Dexter and Luke. Yeah,
Dexter. Yeah, like real magician, fake magician.
Wait, which one's which?
That's up to you to decide.
Illusions, Michael.
Yeah, I'd be okay to run double Mystic.
All right, well,
I think that'd be a blast.
I'll ponder on
4
that.
4 times Delve 2 deep.
Yeah. Oh well.
2 Delve 2 deep.
So erect.
Yeah.
2 Delve 5 me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, TBD, but that's the tentative plan right now. I'll have to think on that. Here's the thing though. no matter what we play, I want to have played the deck a little bit first. So I don't end up with the same like wacky ass Daisy deck that ends up not working like I wanted it to, and then I have to play it for 10 scenarios. So, yeah. TBD on that. Pay attention to our Discord if you want to be... Or of course, you can just follow our Twitch channel. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Nick, how about you?
I actually did get some Arkham in. It wasn't the aforementioned Lost in Time and Space Dream Eaters campaign that Ian and I are trying to reschedule. And it wasn't the... it wasn't any more Achievement Hunter, which I should get the next episode recorded. I just haven't yet. I've actually been playing solo Return to the Path to Carcosa hard mode with Roland, because when in doubt, go back to the core set investigator that you really like. And where am I at now? I think I'm just about to start Phantom of Truth. I took a detour to do Excelsior. But otherwise...
You would.
Well, of course I would. Of course. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's fun. Hard mode is a thing. Like that -6 comes up more often than I would like it to. Mm-hmm. And but I'm trying to do... I was trying to get cheeky and do more like the tricks to just pull clues off locations without tests. And then I did The Last King, and I was like, this is hard. Because some of those like parlay tests are just straight up tests, like I can't pull clues off of the guests, so that one got tough. I actually reset that one and did it again, and I think I just spent the first agenda building up and then let the clues go to the locations when the guests turned, and then just pulled the clues from there and just mowed them down. And I think I killed 3 of the guests. I didn't interview any of them. I killed 3 of them, and then at the end of the scenario, I burned the whole place down. So I ended up killing the rest of them too. So, because why not?
You are such a guardian.
I tried to play it legit the first time. I really did, and I couldn't. So then I was like, fine, they're all dead.
I'm gonna flamethrower these 3 bad people, and I'm gonna flamethrower the house they were in.
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, I'm doing my my cheeky lead investigator build that's all about like Dr. Mallison, an art student and laboratory assistant, and calling in favors. And then I had originally working
suddenly it's 2017 again.
Right? Exactly. It's good times, man. It's a throwback to when Carcosa came out, because most of those cards came out late Dunwich, early Carcosa. But I had like Working a Hunch and Scene of a Crime in there, but I ended up upgrading out of those. But yeah, it's super fun. I love Solo Roland. He's great. So, and Path to Carcosa is still, I think, top of my list for campaigns.
It's so good.
It really is. Return doesn't change a whole lot, but I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. What needed changing?
Yeah, and even then, I'll now that we have Return, I will never play vanilla again. But if I would be okay, like knowing what the differences are, I think I'd be okay not having Return. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
I like the few minor tweaks that were made. I love it. Like the change to Ancient Evils. Like I just love having the different Ancient Evils.
It's a choice
in all the campaigns. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a tough choice because sometimes you're like, well, I guess this is just Ancient Evils and I'm okay with it. Maybe
turns out
maybe
it's not so bad.
Wasn't so bad in the first place. Yeah.
Well, but
the change to was it Deanne Divine, the host?
Diane Divine, yeah.
Diane, like perfect change.
Yep.
Right. Like it was just ever so slight tweaks so she's actually stays important.
Yeah.
That's all that scenario needed. There, done. Right. Like some little party guests can flip over. Cool tweak. Didn't need to be done, but it was, and yeah, like it just
exactly.
Yeah. God, that campaign is so good.
I feel like Return to Dunwich, I'll never play vanilla, but I would play vanilla Carcosa. And honestly, the rule where you mix up the possible encounter sets and include some new, some old, like I could actually see myself playing in that mode when I tackle Carcosa again. Instead of
is that a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing for the return boxes.
Wait, it has
Like
you randomly choose between the... I thought you automatically choose the new encounter set.
No, so you take like the old ancient evils and the new whatever they are in Carcosa. I forgot what they're called.
Delusory
Something
evils.
of evils. Yeah. So there's 3 in each, right? So you shuffle them up so you can't see them. You mix them up, and then you deal 3 into the encounter deck, not knowing what they are.
Holy hell!
Yeah, so you don't know if you have all 3 ancient evils, all 3 delusionary, or it's like 2 of one of the other.
Is that that how you're supposed to play it, or is that like an alternate rule?
That's an option.
It's an alternate.
Okay.
One.
I was like, have I been playing Returns wrong ever since they came out?
No.
No.
The
I
box
totally
says
forgot about that.
include them all or include them randomly.
I see. Okay, that's fun.
Yeah. So if you're gonna play Return over and over and over again, that's a way to kind of spice it up a bit, because it still keeps like Diane Divine doing what she does in the new way, but the encounter deck isn't as predictable.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Ian, what you been playing?
I finally picked up Arkham again a few days ago, and I'm always looking for a solo investigator that I haven't played in a while. And I realized I hadn't played solo York since Carcosa, speaking of Carcosa. So I thought I'd trot out William again. And the whole idea, recently I've been playing mostly kind of the York style where he's just knife wielding, throwing knives. So I wanted to play a little bit different style, which is a York deck where he's using Meat Cleaver and Enchanted Blade for weapons. So not really looking to recycle weapons that often, and it's more so that he's recycling like the keepsakes and leather coats. And then using Jessica Hyde and Peter as allies. So the idea is just to make him as resilient as possible, that nothing can get him. And then this tricky part, right, with Solo York is the clue getting part. So I've tried to include scene of the crime, obviously, but also on the hunt to get more enemies to kill, to use his ability, but also to trigger evidence, which I have in the deck. And then also flashlights, which that's another thing I'm recycling. I'm doing a lot of like active desperation with flashlight, like checking flashlights at people, so that I can recycle the flashlight and get more use. So the only problem with the deck is that I called the deck the Unkillable York is the name of the deck, and that is
oh boy,
that's you tempted.
That's just asking the encounter deck too. So so the deck killed me the game before last. It found a way to. Or at least knock me out and give him a physical trauma, which I didn't think would be possible, but the game found a way because it was 1,000 Shapes of Horror, and I kept failing the stupid test, so that unnameable enemy
the unnameable?
kept attacking me over and over and over again. So he lasted longer than most investigators would, but not long enough. But now that I've got the full rig out, like now that I've got both Jessica's and both copies of Ever Vigilant, like I played, what was the last scenario? Point of No Return. And yeah, then he truly felt like Unkillable York. The only problem with the deck is just, it's still a little slow on the clue getting, which is something we'll probably talk about in our discussion today about solo gators, but, I think there's like some missing piece there that can get him to be a little bit faster, because right now he's still a little bit deck dependent on drawing those clue solutions.
So you're saying that you played Ever Vigilant without Stick to the Plan?
Mm-hmm. It turns out to be good in a guy who wants to play assets a lot.
I'm more surprised that he played Evidence. I forgot that card existed.
Well, when you're York, you only have so many options. I feel you.
Exactly.
I feel you.
And I normally play the permanent version of Evidence. So
called Roland.
Yeah. Evidence breaks.
But the on the hunt plays feel pretty good when they come off.
Nice.
Oh yeah, especially with Scene of the Crime. All right,
size.
Let's all
load size large.
We have got some fun patron updates, so Ian, take us through them if you please.
Oh, it's me again. I guess I better look at the show notes. There's quite a few things for patron business. So first off, special thanks to our board members. That's Chris B, Chris H, Chris M, Morton, Jared, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Dave, Abilio, Nathan, Chad, and Robert. Thanks so much for your huge and generous support of the podcast. Special shout out to a random patron this time around is Daniel Gillette. Thanks, Daniel, for your support as well. Please visit mythosmerch.com if you have not visited yet to see all our cool merchandise. And I'll mention a special bit of merch in the future coming up here. But there's a few other things to get through. Like, for example, we hit our tattoo goal.
Yay!
Which, again, I feel like we say this a lot, but this was a goal we set, which honestly I was like, we're never going to hit this. Like, we're just going to put this into the air and we'll never actually have to do it. Yeah. But yeah. And
now you guys have to because of your hubris. Or opposite of hubris?
No, hubris would be accurate.
Humility.
All right.
Yeah. So how this is going to work is we hit the goals. So both myself and Sean are going to get inked. Timeline dependent on, health safety stuff, because we'll have to see when tattoo parlors are open in our various locales and all that good stuff, and when we feel comfortable. But it will happen. And the best part, maybe from a patron perspective, is that we are each going to, that is me and Sean, are going to select 2 different potential options, and patrons will get to vote on which tattoo we get. Anyone who's a patron at any level by the set date, once we start getting the voting going, will be able to get their vote in. And obviously, we're going to find a way to document and film our collective misery while we get these tattoos. So if you want to vote for which tattoo we're going to put on our bodies forever for the rest of our lives, be sure to become a patron so you can put your vote in.
The next patron stretch goal is laser treatment to
Remove
remove
No, I trust our patrons to do me fine and pick a good tattoo. Plus, both my ideas are good, so.
I'm going to vote for the Drawn to the Flame logo.
Hey now.
I'm gonna vote for the one where it's dick butt, but with a Mythos Busters tattoo on dick butt, and then you have to get that tattoo.
Jeez.
Is the Mythos Busters logo on the dick or on the butt?
Yes.
Well, he's all one. Yes.
Oh, the inclusive or, you got me again.
Oh man, yes, so this is gonna happen and it's gonna be a real thing. I wonder if future patron goals, it's gonna turn our lives into like some Black Mirror choose your own adventure, where they choose our future careers and what babies we have and all that.
Yes, the name of the next child born by one of the Mythos Busters.
Oh my gosh.
I'd be okay naming one Shotgun.
Why is your baby called Manatee Quiche?
No, Quiche is his middle name.
Yeah, get it right.
Only we laugh at our jokes, it's fine.
So,
occasionally my son does, but he's 4.
That's our...
It's about our
Yeah, that's our demographic right there. So our next patron goal is going to be another standalone scenario. Like we created Consternation on the Constellation for Gen Con last year. It feels longer ago now, but it was last year. So our next...
Shit.
Yeah, our next patron goal will be another standalone scenario, which is exciting because I'm always psyched to create more scenarios. Oh, we got more stuff. This is not just for patrons, but just a big general thing, which a reminder that instead of Gen Con, since Gen Con is canceled this year, we are putting on Farkham Con. Arkham from Afar, FarkhamCon, July 30th to August 2nd. We've already got lots of good stuff on the schedule already, lots of stuff that you should be excited about, although you'll have to take our word for it right now. We'll be adding more in the lead up. We're not quite revealing the schedule yet until we get everything scheduled. Because we have various other community contributors participating, so we're coordinating all that. But the important thing on your end is make sure to pre-register if you haven't already, which just means you get email updates when we push those out, so you know when the event schedule goes live and all that good stuff. The link will be in the show notes, but we have an easy URL now, which is farkhamcon.com. Where you can pre-register. So, let's see what else we got.
I will say there too, Ian, about the schedule, if anyone is wondering, because I've been kind of helping Justin with this. I don't think I'm underestimating when I say like it's a 4-day thing, like Thursday through Sunday. I'm pretty sure we have at least 12 hours of content for all 4 days.
Oh wow,
if not more, and some of it's like overlapping.
Yeah,
like there is a ton. Like it's all of the Arkham community, all the content creators, like we contacted everybody. We're like, hey, what do you want to do? So there's tons. Make sure you sign up. It's all free kind of thing. So yeah. It's going to be a huge deal. And yeah, like you said, it's going to be a ton of content that you're going to be able to access and make up a little bit for there being no Gen Con. Okay. And participate in.
Yes, and you know, usually not that big a percentage of the Arkham community can make it to Gen Con. It's hard to get there. So, and I guess the bright side of all of this is there's an online convention that will have big participation, hopefully, by a lot of the community. So other stuff. So I mentioned Mythos merch, that we have a new merch item coming, and that is something very topical and useful for our current situation, which is face masks. So we're all going to be wearing face masks for the foreseeable future until something changes. So we wanted to make that whole process a little bit fun and do some good. So we are creating Mythos Busters themed face masks, which will be available on our mythosmerch.com site. And we're going to be donating all proceeds from the masks to Doctors Without Borders to hopefully, you know, help in this time when healthcare and health concerns are such a huge deal and not going away anytime soon. So all masks that are bought from mythosmerch.com, those proceeds are going to Doctors Without Borders. And watch for more info in the near future on our socials and in our Discord so you can see when those are available, and we will greatly appreciate any help with that. So final bit of patron business is we have some brand new job titles to give out. 3 new people who have joined the Mythos Busters offices, which is very exciting. Thanks for doing that. First up, Michael is going to be taking on the title of Decoder of Archaic Hieroglyphs and Extra-Dimensional Nudes.
Got that?
I love how Ian got to read that for the first time live. No,
it didn't quite take the journey that I thought it was going to take. Which is, I mean, personally, my favorite kind of nudes. So
the extra
you get to see everything.
Truly mind warping. Our second
every
job title...
tentacrevice there is.
Oh God, tentacrevice. That's a word
we do aim at 4-year-olds, don't we?
Did not want that in my vocabulary, but it's there now. It's not going away.
Tentacrevice was the name of my acid trance band in high school, by the way.
Oh boy. Okay, our second job title goes to Mike Rudin, who's going to be the caseworker for Reformed Servants of Hastor. And I hear there's a big influx of those after the events of the Carcosa cycle. So thank you for that work. And finally, our last job title goes to, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, but I believe it's Egowitz. Egowitz U. and I believe this name is from the Basque Country.
Nice save.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I recognize where that name comes from. Igwitz is going to be the co-lead of Cultist Candle production, along with Diana. Are you okay with that, Sean?
Yes. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Diana can do her own thing.
Well, a co-lead, right? Like, I mean, we can't just take it away from her. It's,
And if you love something, you must
someone...
let it go. And if it comes back, as she will, she always does, come back, it'll be fine.
Well, at least she has in the past, I guess.
But yeah, those cultists...
That's very mature of you, Sean.
Okay. So thank you guys for hopping on. I hope you enjoy your offices. As always, patrons, hit us up in Discord if we haven't let you into the patron-specific channel yet, and we'll get you in. Last little bit of business, because we've got a lot of it this time. Everyone's mobilizing during COVID times. It's pretty great. We had a very generous offer from Ken, who runs Geekcraft. And if you haven't heard of Geekcraft from us in a while, it's because he was just so there at the beginning of the game. Ken and his wife at Geekcraft make these wonderful bags that everyone uses for chaos bags. I bought one when the game first came out, and y'all know how much I play, and I play almost exclusively physical. I have been beating the shit out of this bag for nigh on 4 years, and only recently has a little bit of wear started to show on the inside of the bag where I drag my fingers. So these things are made to last, and they're just very nice and comfortable.
They also stand up on their own, which is super nice.
Yes. It's so great.
And I own 3 of them, and they all look new. Still.
They're reversible, too, aren't they?
Yep, reversible, embroidered. Variety of different patterns and fabrics to choose from, including the new Blurst bags that he's got planned. Which I hope I'm not giving this away. I think he's been talking about it in our Bling Your Game channel. But it's going to be the blessed symbol on the outside with a kind of a goldish fabric, and then embroidered on the inside is going to be the curse symbol on like purple smoke. And I'm pretty excited about it.
It's reversible. So it just... Yeah,
I'm going to be pretty excited about
Blurst.
it. Anyway, if you find yourself in need of a premium chaos bag, Geekcraft has offered us a discount code for listeners. It's Mythos Busters, and that's going to be good for 15% off of a bag until the end of June. Although I was talking with Ken tonight, they are having some supply issues, some timing issues with shipping, trying to get the fabrics for the Blurst bags in. If that ends up causing too much of a delay, he said he'll extend the coupon until like the Blurst bags come out. So question mark on that. But if you find yourself in need of a bag, go check that out. You can get them at a great price, and you know what? I buy it at list price, so 15% off's the deal.
I bought 3 at list price. I will probably buy a 4th when the Blurst bags come out.
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay. Whew. Past all the business, let's get into the light, frivolous, not complicated at all parts of the game. Scott, what rules PSAs do you have?
Well, for once, I actually have one. So Rex's Curse, everyone's favorite / most hated weakness, partially because, like, part of me feels like it's one of the easiest weaknesses, because once you get to a certain level with Rex, you're just passing all the tests you care about passing, right? And it's the worst because you just have to draw another token, and it's kind of just annoying, more than anything else, right? Turns out, though, I think, and this came from a discussion in the rules chat, where we realized that we've all been playing Rex's Curse wrong for years.
Do tell.
So I'll just read over the force effect, because you'll need it for this. When you would succeed at a skill test, return the revealed chaos token to the bag and reveal a new chaos token. If this effect causes you to fail the test, shuffle Rex's Curse into your deck. Okay? So let's say you're playing and you're 5 up on a test, and you draw the Elder Thing token, and it's a -3 if you fail, take 2 damage or something like that, right? Because you're still passing, you would throw that back in the bag, and then let's say you draw the tentacle, and you fail it. You're like, sucks, I failed. Now I shuffle Rex's Curse back in. However,
No.
that elder thing was still revealed. It was not canceled. It was not ignored. It was just placed back in the bag. So now you have revealed an if you fail, and then you failed. So I think a lot of people were forgetting about that first token. Because it's not like Wendy's ability. It's not like so many other token manipulation things we have. If you fail, that token still counts. Now the one we weren't totally sure about is if you're 5 up, you draw -3, you throw it back because you have to draw another one, you draw another -3, are you now at -6? Because you return the revealed chaos token in the bag and reveal a new chaos token.
A new or another? New tells me...
A new.
Interesting.
So one thing for sure is what we were discussing was the signs on it. Yeah. So I think the consensus was you pull a new one means you ignore the negative modifier, but the fact that it was revealed. So same thing with like shriveling. If you reveal bad stuff token, it's still revealed, and it's not canceled. It's not ignored. It's just put back in the bag.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna put.
So I guess Rex is gonna stay in my box for longer.
Well, hang on though.
Taboo. We call this taboo plus.
It sucks more in that moment, but it's also gonna shuffle the curse back in more often, right?
Well, I mean,
Potentially.
no, because if it's the double numerical, which we think it is not. Like if you draw -3 and then draw another -3 again, you're not -6.
Okay.
We're pretty sure it's not that because this is actually an answer hasn't come back from Matt yet.
Okay.
So maybe this is a little premature, but reveal a new chaos token to me says you're revealing a new one, but doesn't say cancel the old one. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that one's been
So
out there
those
for a
ones.
good long while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like it needed
Since,
a new
like-
card to show us that.
It was like, the first expansion after the core set. So
Literally
Yeah.
product number 3.
Yeah.
Or 4, I guess.
anyways,
Yeah. All right.
there you
Well,
go.
God.
I don't know how many people are
I was about to say,
playing
sorry, Rex.
but-
I guess I'll continue to not play you.
Yeah.
Truth.
I'll have to get my Rex's Curse out of the bike spokes to read it and then stick it firmly back in the bike spokes.
Oh.
Probably the parallel advanced version of the curse will count up both tokens or something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's it.
Fun.
Enjoy Rex.
Enjoy, Rex. All right, guys. So let's move it in on to our main discussion topic tonight, which I will very likely largely remain in the background of. I'll do my best to be like the listener surrogate, because I don't assume I'll have much to add by way of hot tips. But playing true solo, one person, one investigator, none of this faking two investigators nonsense that so many of us consider to be the superior way to play the game and are probably right. So all joking aside though, I feel like most of the community that interacts, and I don't know how by how large a margin, but I feel like most of the people that we talk with play true solo primarily, if not exclusively. Do you guys have the same feeling?
Seems that way.
Yeah.
Based on
there was a
our
poll
sample
on-
size.
Yeah, there was a poll on Facebook, the Facebook group, and about, goodness, it was like 40-ish%. The biggest bar was I play true solo.
Sure.
And the next one was solo with two hands.
Yep. Okay. And maybe that, the dichotomy between the two and the reasons for them, I know we've touched on it before, but maybe that's its own separate episode. But if you've taken it upon yourself to decide that you're going it alone in the Mythos, it is its own special thing that has lots and lots of implications on how you build, how you play, what you value. So I suppose let's dive into it. Guys, why do you think one would play true solo instead of playing the multiplayer game as a multiplayer game?
Nice dig there.
That's all I got, man.
I find I play it solo because, one, it's easy. Because I can just play with myself. Oh, God. But, I don't have to think about building 2 companion decks. I just build one deck that's meant to do what I expect it to do, which is everything. And I find it a neat challenge / puzzle. Because it's much more puzzly, I find, than a normal multiplayer game.
Sure. And when you say puzzly, what does that mean to you specifically?
Usually, I play a lot of Arkham, right? And so I'm repeating these campaigns and scenarios quite a bit. That I have these list of objectives. I want to complete them in this order. How many actions do I have to complete each of these? How am I going to get that done in the proper amount of time? It's much more granular than I think a 4-player game is okay, we have to complete this. You two go off over there and do your thing, and us two will go over here, and I guess we'll meet back in the middle when stuff is done. Every action counts way more in solo, and I feel that's the puzzle.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the main reasons I play solo is I think it's just convenience factor that I've mentioned before on the show that I usually have 4 or 5 campaigns going on at any given time, and it's just easier to build and break down a single deck versus 2 decks. That doesn't stop me from playing quite a bit of two-handed, but it's one reason why I'll sometimes tend towards solo, just that it's easier to set up and build and all of that.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. My prime Arkham time is after everyone else is in bed. Or when my kids are getting their hour of screen time during the day. It's okay, how much Arkham can I play in an hour? And it's just so much easier if I'm only playing with one deck, because then that's fewer cards that I have to move around in general, fewer decks that I have to prep in case I was in the middle of a different campaign and I'm switching it up or whatever. It's just simpler. So,
and I think beyond even what you guys have said, just as someone who plays primarily two-handed as a contrast, there's a serious mental bandwidth that comes along with that. You're adding twice the complexity, you're basically taking double the turns. Much as I advocate for two-handed solo, because I think it is kind of a good way to get multiplayer out of solo, it's rare that I finish a full game in one sitting, because it just it asks more of you. It just asks more of your brain, and sometimes I as someone who champions two-handed, I completely understand why someone would be nah, I'd rather just play one.
Yeah, depending on your investigator pair-up, that could definitely be a problem. If you're doing, I think, maybe Jenny and Roland, it'd be easier than if you're doing Luke and Lola.
Or Silas and Min with all the skill cards.
All right, so I'm going to add this and take this back to my hand and then play Lucky.
Yeah.
So what? Okay, so we've already... Oh, go ahead, Ian.
I think there is a bit of a piece, too, of similar to Scott, the puzzle of just figuring out how you can build a deck that can do everything, cover all the bases. That's part of it, too.
Sure. So to that end, what do you guys think are the kind of the big bullet points on how True Solo differs from both on the deck building and play side of multiplayer into higher player counts?
Well, the first bullet point we have, it was added by Nick, but I can't agree any more than I already do. The swinginess of solo can just be absolutely backbreaking.
Yeah.
And when you say swinginess, what does that look like?
You are a solo Daisy, and you draw your first 3 encounter cards are 3 enemies. You just and swinginess, I think specifically to the encounter deck, if you just get hit with the 3 encounter cards off the first 3 that just really wreck you, as opposed to, Ancient Evils in solo is not always that bad. You're okay, free turn, I guess. Like I lose a turn, but I also don't have to do anything. Like fight an enemy to lose that turn.
I take issue with saying I lose a turn with Ancient Evils, but I get it for simplicity's sake. Carry on.
In general, right? Like it just you lose a round, ish. But yeah, like it can swing hard, and then sometimes it's just almost impossible to dig yourself out of that hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it plays into just. I think part of what plays into that swinginess is there's no margin for error because it's just you. Like, even if you just have one other player, a 2-player game, if, let's say, you draw an enemy and you're not quite set up, you don't have a weapon out, that's fine. Like, your partner will probably be able to help you, whether it's attacking that enemy or pitching in icons even. But if you're in solo and you draw an enemy and you're not set up yet, like, you can just be devastated. So I think that's a big part, that just having one other player, one other set of options to give you a lifeline is huge. So that plays into solo a lot, like realizing that you have to be set up and ready to go as fast as possible.
Because in solo, no one can hear you scream.
I also think that like swinginess from like one scenario to the next, like in a campaign, I think that if you're playing with 2 investigators, they're kind of you don't feel I don't know, maybe you do, but I think you feel the difference between scenarios more in solo than you do in 2-player. And what I mean specifically is like going from oh gosh, what is it? Witching Hour? No, what's the next one in Circle Undone?
Death's Doorstep?
Death's Doorstep. Going from Death's Doorstep to Secret Name and then to Wages of Sin, like as two-handed or 2 investigators, you're kind of like, okay, that was a rough go. But in solo, it's literally like they pulled the rug and the floor and the ground and everything out from under you for Secret Name. Like that bump,
and it's a real high fall because you were in the attic.
Exactly. Yeah, so like things like that, like going from one scenario to the next can have a much bigger, it can be a much bumpier road than if you had 2 or 3 investigators, because each scenario demands different things of you or demands different degrees of success from you. And some of them, like Ian, going back to what Ian said about margin of error, Secret Name in solo has a very narrow margin of error that it will allow from you, and you need to stay on top of that scenario, otherwise you will not fare well. So.
Yeah, I think I agree that like the difficulty spikes are just that much spikier at the top. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And another key part is the deck building piece that we mentioned of like you have 30 cards with most investigators to fit everything you need to handle clue getting and monster killing and whatever, and usually some kind of card draw or tutors to grab the cards you really need because you need to be consistent. Like it's just it's not like in multiplayer where you can specialize your deck and maybe have some space for even some cute cards in 3 or 4 player. But in solo, it's like 30 cards. Every card has to be pulling its weight.
The old Scott theme deck.
30 good cards.
30 good cards.
So when you look then to decide who you'll play in a solo campaign, what do you guys think are the important features of a competent solo deck? Or I guess particularly which competent solo investigator you choose?
I think I want to preface this too by saying, and I don't know if this opinion is shared by the others, I think every investigator that's out is, and I'm going to underline this word, capable of succeeding at solo.
I'd agree.
Just how much you have to fight tooth and nail for those victories is where the difference is, I think.
I'd agree.
I have a really sarcastic comment to make, but I don't play enough solo to actually make it, so.
I feel like you could say that after like every point.
I mean, it's never stopped you before.
True!
One of the key things I consider for looking at investigators, just this question of how long is it going to take this investigator to get going? Like, what's the baseline set of assets that will allow this gator to get clues and fight? And how many cards is that going to take? And in other words, how many actions, how long is it going to take to get going? And the best solo gators tend to have a way to get going a little bit quickly, or to be able to put off putting out some key assets because, let's say, they have high agility, so they have a way to get out of a sticky situation if they need to. Those kind of things I think are important.
I like to look for usable I call it high level usable skills. So you have a 4 or a 5, possibly 2 different 4s in usable skills.
So not agility is what you're saying.
Well, no, because
It was only a matter of time.
Agility, I know. Specifically only in solo, and mark it on the calendar. I'm praising agility, but like agility, because you're only drawing 1 encounter card per turn, and if even let's say a half the deck is enemies, which is a lot for most encounters I'm finding, you're drawing 1 enemy every second turn. If you evade that guy for 1 action instead of spending 2 or 3 actions killing it, like over the game, you may spend the same amount of actions, but you got other actions in between, and maybe you can outrun it a bit. Like, my current favorite solo investigator, Ursula, no surprising no one. Like, you have a 4 in agility, a 4 in intellect, you can just go. Right? Ashcan is great for that, where you essentially, with your dog, you have 4 intellect, 4 combat. You're good to go. Right? Like Ian, you're saying, who can start off fast? Those are quick starts, right? Roland, right? You have a 4 in combat, and when you kill things, clues show up. You can get going quite quick. So, not saying that you don't need to put stuff down, but your base stats are just, you're good to go from the very beginning.
Yeah. I think I kind of look for a blend between what Ian and Scott both said, in that I look for investigators that don't rely as heavily on a kit, based off of whether that's their skills or just their ability. And I've made a list here of investigators that I particularly like solo. And I will admit that once I got to Mystic and Survivor, I was kind of reaching, because I don't play Mystic and Survivor as often, and I don't play them solo as often, other than a select few. But yeah, I definitely look for the investigators that have an ability that will cover ground for them, or help them with situations that are particularly rough solo, like when you have to do everything yourself, so action compression abilities, stuff like that, and then also have skills that I can work with. So I try to avoid Preston solo, but
I've heard things.
Yeah,
he's a different duck.
Yeah, he's very different. Like, I think he can be really good. For some reason, I just don't quite vibe with Preston. But I think it's just a playstyle thing. But I think in general, some of the best solo gators, I agree, have a really good built-in ability, and usually that built-in ability revolves around providing an extra action somehow. Whether it's Ursula getting a free investigate, Finn getting a free evade, etc. And I saw on your list, Nick, that you said you're reaching for, let's say, someone like Wendy, but I actually don't think that's a reach, because she doesn't have a free action per se, but her mulligan is basically making each action she has have a much, much higher chance of success, so you're saving actions in that way. So I think Wendy very much fits in that category too, for that reason.
And I've heard, like, just digging down on Wendy a bit, because I think she is one of the best solo investigators. Like, she's,
not if you ask
to
Facebook.
me, like, pretty much tied.
Agreed.
Well, yeah, but
that's why we don't.
She's like, for me, like, it's Ursula and Wendy each, like, it's like neck and neck, and they're each pulling ahead in different scenarios and stuff like that. But to me, Wendy, like, some people see that card redraw as, I'm throwing away a card just to draw another token. It's like, okay, well, you're throwing away a card that's essentially saying, try this test again with everything you've committed. So essentially, you're on every single card, she's said, like, fast, take another action, has to be identical to the action you're taking.
Dude, if that was an event, people would play it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Someone argued, and we were, during the discussion, I shouldn't say argued, they're discussing, it's like, and they went to the click economy, which we I'm not going to dig into that, but they're like, but it's a card for essentially an action, so it equates. It's okay. And I was like, but that depends, right? Like, depending on what you have committed, if that's your like double or nothing plus quick thinking plus your backstab, is it backstab or sneak attack? I can never remember which one's the test.
Backstab is the test.
Backstab.
Backstab.
Right, like redrawing that tentacle is worth way more than one action, right? And you have a manual dexterity in there too, right? Like it equates to you getting 2 free actions plus doing 6 damage plus drawing 2 cards. Like it's So to me, her ability is worth an action at least.
Yeah, the Chaos Bag demands so much of like the game's rhythm. Like that is ultimately the tempo that we're playing against, right? It's the encounter sets and everything, like the encounter deck, but it's also the Chaos Bag. And she gives you, and from the core set, like that early on, she gave us a measure of control over every single interaction with the Chaos Bag, which is huge.
One other thing I look for solo investigators as well is what access they have as far as card pool. I think this matters a lot less now with our current card pool than it did way back before, because if you wanted clues, you had maybe 1 or 2 options outside of Seeger. Now every class has a different way to get clues, but that they have ways to get clues, right? They have different ways to attack, but they have different ways to attack, where it used to just be basically Guardian and a little bit of Rogue, a little bit of Survivor, right? Like, oh hey, look, Fire Axe, because you can take it. But there's so many options now, and as long as what they have access to in class jives with what else they have on their off classes.
I think one question I would throw out there for you guys is, let's say you had to choose between a solo investigator that's a little better at getting clues or a little better at handling enemies. Which way do you think you would tend towards?
Clues.
Enemies.
Clues every time.
I agree. Yeah.
Wait, with Sean? Or
I guess that wasn't that hard.
I know nothing.
I guess to me, like, you will always need to deal with clues.
Yeah.
You won't always have to deal with enemies. You should have a plan for enemies.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But, like, how many scenarios don't depend on clues?
Well, the default state of the game is clues equals progress. And enemy equals progress is an exception to the rule. So, and even in those scenarios when the enemy is your progress, there is almost always a clause that says, or just clear this location of clues. So,
right.
Although I guess now that I'm thinking about it more, I do agree, but I think if I had to choose between an investigator who's like stellar and getting clues, let's say a 5 intellect, but really crap in enemy management stats, or an investigator who's a little bit weaker, let's say 3 or 4 intellect, but actually is decent in enemy management, I think I'd probably pick the second one, because my experience with like the very strong intellect seekers and solo is that swinginess can really come to bite them, versus an investigator who's maybe not as strong in raw intellect but still very respectable, but at least they can get themselves out of a jam. So
I think it also, like, again, I mean, this is a big caveat, it comes back to card pool, right? Like I think there's certain investigators that, yeah, man, they're really bad at dealing with enemies, like, as an investigator, but they might have access to both Survivor and Rogue, and now they've got, like, Small Favor, they have Stray Cat, they have, oh god, what's the...
improvised weapon.
Improvised weapon, what?
Infighting.
The green favor. The evade favor.
All these great enemy management cards.
Decoy.
Decoy.
Decoy! It's decoy.
I was just waiting for Scott to yell at me to stop with the bad cards, but...
I've just grown numb to it.
Fair.
Yeah. But I see what you're saying too, Ian. Like, clues don't hit you if you don't successfully investigate them.
Not unless you're playing TCU.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
TCU is just, yeah. That's a solo experience.
It sure is.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot more cards as well, I think, that are you can just pick up clues in weird ways.
Yeah.
Whereas dealing with enemies, it's usually just attacking or evading. Like I think there's fewer cute ways to get rid of enemies than there are cute ways to get clues. If that makes sense.
So as you guys...
Sure.
Yeah.
So you guys are kind of already talking about it, but I'm kind of curious. When you look at an investigator, what about it what might make you wary of taking that investigator into solo mode? So is it just
when they have ones in all of their stats?
Well,
or zeros in all of their stats?
Yeah.
I generally say like a 2 in intellect makes me scared, but again, like Scott said, that's heavily dependent on card pool, because there are some investigators now with 2 intellect, you have enough tricks that you don't have to worry about it. But generally, it just slows you down, because even if you have those tricks, you're going to be a bit dependent on drawing those and being able to play those consistently. So it's like we were mentioning, tempo's king, so if you have to slow down even a little bit because you have to find your clue tools versus an investigator who's just rocking 4 intellect from the gate and can just investigate right away, that's can be a big difference.
I think investigators that, we kind of touched on this as well, ones that need kind of a big kit to get set up, to get rolling, which, I mean, as much as I joke, I enjoy Preston Solo. I think he's a puzzle upon a puzzle, and he takes a very different way to play solo, but he's also really draw dependent, and you need certain things to come out so that you can automatically get those clues, automatically get rid of enemies, do all these things, and so
it's one of the reasons why solo mystics, and obviously it's not all mystics, like people like Luke and Marie can be good because they have high starting intellect, but traditionally, a lot of people recognize that solo mystics can be tricky because most of them want to leverage a willpower stat to do 2 things, combat and clue getting, and in order to do that, they have to get assets out because they can't do it naturally, so all that takes time. So that's, to me, is kind of like the classic example of investigators who take a while to get going solo, because you have to play all these assets just to have them do like the basic kind of actions of the game.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing for steering away from an investigator for solo literally just comes down to card pool, for the most part. And when like you said, we joke about Preston having 1s and everything. But for me, it's more like I look at Preston and what does he have? He has mainly green with some red. And that is what turns me away from him as a solo investigator. Because I know it's possible, like you said, every investigator is capable. He's capable of playing solo, but I know I'm probably just going to stress about it too much, and I'm not going to have as much fun playing him because I'm going to see all the mistakes that I make. You know what I mean? Whereas if it's an investigator that has any amount of yellow in their deck or any amount of blue in their deck, I'm like, perfect. Yeah. Give me them. Like if it's that's just awesome. Honestly, that's what I gravitate to for solo play, because I know that those are the colors that handle the things you need to do. So if it's someone like Rita, I tend to avoid her for solo play because she doesn't have access to the best. But this is the thing. I'm not saying I don't like them. You know what I mean? I just only like them when they're with someone else.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like I'm reverse or different, because for me, like, the main thing that I look for, and this is simplifying things way too much, but if I see an investigator has 0 to 2 survivor, I'm instantly like, okay, baby, we got a solo investigator going, because I feel like this survivor pool has so many cards that are just meant for solo play, which I guess makes sense thematically. The whole lone survivor thing. So not for every investigator, of course, but like if I had to pick one off class for a solo investigator, I'm probably picking
I mean, it's
Survivor
everyone's
most of the
favorite
time.
off
It
class.
really
is.
They
Truly.
just have tools for everything.
I do
right?
need,
like
yeah.
Even
I do need
Scott's.
to play
jack of all trades, master of
It
none.
is Scott's favorite off class, though he still sports red in the Discord.
It's still my favorite class. We just wait till Stella comes out, okay? I am just so Stella's gonna be amazing solo. Just by the way, I think
I'm
she's
excited
gonna be
for
top.
all of those investigators.
Oh,
Like even Nathaniel Cho, who everyone's like, like I'm still excited to play him.
I'm so. Oh, right. You just said Nathaniel. I thought you
I
said
want to
Calvin.
punch Cthulhu.
Just so many spirit cards. One thing, and this is, I think this might be my most controversial statement of the evening, but we'll see how you guys feel. Making me wary of an investigator is all-rounders.
Interesting.
So the ones I'm thinking of are
Lola.
Calvin. Well, yeah, okay. But
We call
Lola,
Calvin an all-rounder.
I
Or
Calvin doesn't know
like,
what he is till halfway through the scenario.
Zeros are very rare.
have you guys ever drawn a zero? It's round, right? But I mean, like,
It's as round as he can
yeah,
get.
he can get all the way up to 4, but then you're almost near death, right? Like, it's, but okay, but just hear me out. Like, all rounders like him, Lola, who I think does fine solo, because she has 3s and everything. But like her and Jenny, and you're gonna be like, Jenny, what the hell? But they're jack of all trades, master of none, right? And like 3s are okay, yeah. And like Sean, you said before, like 3 is something you can work with. I don't have time to work with it in solo.
Well, if you're playing
Right, like-
hard or expert,
Yeah.
yeah. But Jenny's standard solo, she's really good.
I think she is okay, but I don't like. I put her middle of the pack at most.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree with Scott on that. And again, maybe it's just a playstyle thing, but I think I tend to shine, like, as much as I love Jenny as a character, like, I put people like Finn and Tony above her just because those 4s and 5s make a huge difference in how quickly you have to get cards out. Jenny can be quite good on solo, but she is one because the thing with all-rounders is you got to put assets out to bump up those stats, otherwise you're going to be failing. So it's a tempo thing that just slows it down a little bit. This whole conversation makes me laugh because it was a common discussion in Lord of the Rings that Sean will be very familiar with, that the all-rounder heroes that were like 2 willpower, 2 attack, 2 defense were often kind of slagged because it was better to have specialize in attack or willpower or defense than to be an all-rounder. And I think it's funny that translates a little bit to Arkham as well, I think.
Like, I love to see a 1 in a stat.
Well, who else?
Right?
So we labeled the obvious ones. Who else would you consider an all-rounder then, other than Lola Preston? I'm sorry, Lola Preston, Calvin, and Jenny.
So I will make an exception for Ashcan, because I think he's generally a good all-rounder in a multiplayer game, but he's an all-rounder with 4s, with his dog, essentially, right? With Duke. So I make an exception to him.
I mean, you're basically playing two-handed when you play Ashcan solo, right? Because it's him and his dog.
One-handed, one pod.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think someone that I'd put in the all-rounder category that might sound weird, but it makes sense once you play him as Skids, actually. Like, he has 4 agility, which is strong agility, but the way he plays is you have to build up both his intellect and his combat. So his intellect and combat are both kind of middling at 3s, so it makes him feel like an all-rounder in that sense.
Yeah.
And again, not to say you can't run a good solo Skids deck, it's just one of the things that makes him tricky.
But he also has that extra action, right? Like, those extra... I don't think we
yeah, that helps.
We dig down on the extra action investigators enough, but, like, if you have an investigator that gets you an extra action, like, adding 33% more actions to a game is a really good way to play the game.
Yeah.
Oh, it's huge.
Other all-rounders... I dare to put Safina in there, and not saying she's bad. I think she's good. She's actually quite a capable solo investigator. But I feel like she also needs a little bit more setup to get going on the clue side. But she's got a good defense from the start, but she's just an all-rounder. Super blast to play.
I would say that by that same token, Zoe, she's really fun to play solo, but yeah, she does rely on her assets, especially for clues. If you're not pulling those events like scene of the crime and evidence, then you're gonna need like Sixth Sense or something to help you get clues, and that's just a reliance that you could do without with some other investigators. So then, would you consider then, by that token, 4-2-4-2 or 2-4-2-4 or whatever to be all rounders?
So you're saying anyone with 2 2s and 2 4s?
2 2s and 2 4s, yeah. So like Joe Diamond?
No, because I think Joe Diamond, he's a weird one solo.
He is.
But I think he's pretty capable.
Sure. Because he has yellow axes.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily call him an all-rounder because like he has the 4s.
Well, so does Safina and Zoe.
Yeah, but Safina and Zoe have him in
I consider,
willpower. I guess is my thing.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go all in on
I think
willpower,
4s in any of the...
Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I think 4s in any of the key stats like means that they're not an all-rounder. I think it's the 3s in the key stats or a 4 in a stat that you can't easily utilize like willpower
Okay.
That makes it tricky.
Like if you're playing a Mystic and they have 4 willpower, then you're like, if you're going to go, eggs in one basket and bring that willpower up to 5 or 6 and start using that, that's fine. But it's when you have someone who is like off-class Mystic, like Safina, how much, like if you're going to use her agility, how much room do you have for willpower stuff if you're also supporting her agility? Zoe, it's almost like it's a defensive stat, but she has the Dunwich splash. Like it's... Whereas opposed to playing Agnes solo, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to get my willpower up to 7, put all my eggs in one basket, it's all spells, here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's part of why you look at someone like Father Mateo, who's a 4-will, which he's going to have to use his will to do stuff, which means you have to build him up. But it's not even like a natural 5, so you're going to have to build up his willpower too. And then his other stats, like I think he's a 3 intellect, 2 combat, right? If I'm remembering correctly. Like those are not great stats to. So it's not like he can utilize those that quickly without some help to make up for the willpower ones, like to buy time until you can get those willpower assets out. So I think that's a reason why someone like Father Mateo is not commonly thought of as a good solo gator.
And his deck building is so constrained.
Yeah.
Like that, I think that's a big part of him. So Jim being 4-3-3-2, I guess like my thing with Mystics, if I'm looking at a Mystic, and we talked about the high level usable skills, I want a high willpower because that's what I'm going to be using as a Mystic. I pretty much want a 5 to start with, or a 4 that I know I can get higher really quick, like Luke with the Hawkeye folding cameras, right? Like my willpower is going to go high, so is my intellect eventually, and so now I'm like, oh sweet, so I don't have to fully go. But like if I'm going Mystic and I'm going to be using willpower as my all-in stat, I probably want a 5 to start.
Well, I think with someone like Luke, you're not going... And that's another thing, too. Like, well, Mystics are kind of a special case. But with someone like Luke, you're not relying on Will for your clues, necessarily, because he has that Seeker access. So you're pretty much just, at least from my experience playing Luke, is that my main use of willpower is to supplement his enemy management. So... But yeah, all right. I would agree. I would generally agree with everything you said. To put a nice little bow on that.
So, say you've picked an investigator finally among the many options we have.
After a lengthy discussion with yourself in a mirror.
Yeah.
What do you think really kind of outlines the differences between how you build and pilot that deck in true solo versus multiplayer?
You have to have a plan for clues, and you have to have a plan for enemies, and you have to fit that all in 30 cards.
I feel like you have to have more than one plan for clues and more than one plan for enemies and fit that into 30 cards.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the deck building really tricky, is you have to have the backup plans and then backup plans for the backup plans. At least that's how I build my solo decks.
I find with clues, evaluating, like, we kind of have building and piloting here is slightly different, but I think with clues, like, usually it's single clues on most locations, unless you're playing Dunwich, which seems to have a lot of 2 clues per investigator. But there's a lot of 1 clue per investigator things, and using cards that are like scene of the crime, where you're like, oh, I want to save for 2 clue location. Nope, use it on 1.
Yeah,
you have to. Drawn to the Flame. Yeah, it sucks, but you know what? When you have a 6 shroud with 1 clue, and you're playing solo, like, just do it. You know, read the signs. Another, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Do it.
Yeah, you could pick up 2 clues, but if you hold all those cards until you have 2 clues, you're not getting that 1 clue, and you're not progressing the game.
Yeah.
So you have to.
I think one of a key thing for piloting, I agree, is just the being able to be very clear about what's you need to have in terms of playing cards versus what's nice to have and what you'd like to have. Like, you're not going to be able, if you take your time to play the whole rig out that you might in multiplayer, you can't do that on solo. You need to decide, these are the 2 assets I need out now, and then get going with the game. Like, you can't afford to. Usually, I mean, maybe there's some weird investigators that it's different, but usually you don't have that time.
I think evasion is much more powerful in solo than in multi. Like, as multiplayer goes up, or as the players go up, evasion becomes. And I'm not gonna, you know, rustle your jimmies here, Ian.
You can rustle mine though.
Like, I just think I think it gets a little less effective. And in the same sense, I think sometimes, like, killing enemies at single player may be more taxing on yourself than multiplayer, or not worth it as much, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can evade that enemy once and then you just stay ahead of it the rest of the game, because that's just how fast you're going, sweet, you dealt with maybe an 8 health enemy with 1 action, and that's it. And in multiplayer, when you're like 4 player, you evade someone, leave them there. When they ready next turn and they're ready to hunt, they have 4 different targets to hunt towards. Yeah. You know what I mean? And depending on the map size, whatever, you may have just screwed someone else over. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I obviously, and surprising no one, I fully agree with you, Scott. And one of the reasons I've been so vocal about the value of agility is that's one of the main ways I play is solo with high agility investigators, and it's just such a powerful way of dealing with enemies. Like, would you rather fight a conglomeration of spheres or other 6 health enemy, or evade them and get out of dodge? Like, that's saving so much actions. And it's the other important thing about and useful thing of a high agility is you can have that weapon in hand and say, I'm not going to play it yet because I can just go about getting clues, if an enemy really does pop out, I can evade it and get a weapon out then, but I won't waste time getting the weapon out now.
Yeah. Have you guys, this is kind of a counterpoint to Scott's just play it attitude or idea that he posited earlier, but if you guys have been playing solo and you're like maybe a third of the way through the scenario and you're at like the first big hurdle and you have a card in your hand, and like, let's say like pulling a clue off a high shroud location, and for some reason, or maybe it's not even high shroud, maybe it's like 4 shroud, and you already burn 2 actions trying to get that clue and you can't. So you use one of your tricks, you play a card from hand, and as you play it, this happens to me all the time, by the way, as that card enters your discard pile, you're like, I really would have loved that at the end of this scenario when I'm gonna need it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul in some instances, because again, you don't have another deck of 30 cards that you can rely on to fill in the gaps that you're leaving behind. You have to deal with the situation here and now, and sometimes that means sacrificing what you may think of as your plan for the future. And I think every time I play solo, I have moments like that where I'm like, this would have been great in about, 2 act flips, but I need it now, so. Ugh.
I think this goes back to what Ian was saying, where you have backups for your backups for your backups.
Right.
Is, you know what, if you try and save that card for the 3rd act, but you can never get past the 1st act, then it's not good for the 3rd act, because the 3rd act just isn't showing up.
Right.
One point I'd like to bring to is, and this is something I had to learn, quote unquote, the hard way in solo, is when you think about attacks of opportunity, everyone concentrates on the whole idea of the attack. I want everyone to just reframe it and think of the opportunity.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
It's very true.
Because there's
though.
so many times playing solo where I'm near the end of the scenario or even mid scenario and I haven't taken a damage or a horror at all.
Yeah.
And I have this enemy engage with me and I'm like, oh, I need to do this and this. I'm like, well, what if he just hits me twice? Who cares? Right? Like if I just need to do this thing before I do other thing, right? And this is a whole topic I think I could cover on an entire, like an AV episode or something. And Sean, maybe we should. I think there's 6 resources in Arkham. There's resources, there's cards, there's actions, there's health, there's sanity, and there's doom. And attacks of opportunity allow you to spend the resource of health or sanity, or both, to do something else when the game is trying to tell you you can't. And obviously you have to be very careful about spending different resources, right? And we see in Mystics all the Doom play and stuff, like you can spend, quote unquote, spend Doom to do something like Renfield, right? But you have to be careful with spending that resource, just as you have to be careful with spending all your cards or spending all your actions or spending all your resources.
No, I totally agree with that. I've had plenty of solo games where I'm engaged with an enemy, sometimes more than one enemy, and I will still play my weapon because I know that if I'm engaged with 2 enemies, play the weapon, take 2 attacks, but then I can take out both enemies with that weapon. Or like engage with an enemy. And I literally did this in Roland when I played him. Engage with an enemy, spend an action to gain a resource, spend an action to play shotgun, and then that enemy's no longer a problem, even though it hit me twice. You know what I mean? So
I think one of the biggest lessons I ever took away from playing Magic, and I know I'm mentioning Magic, but you know, in Magic, each person has 20 life, right? And whoever gets to 0 loses, and that's basically how it works. If or whatever side things, don't forget about that. Whoever gets to 0 loses, right? And when I was watching these cards that people were playing that cost them life to play these cards, and I was like, why would you do that? It's hurting yourself. And when someone explained to me the idea that life is a resource that you can spend, and as long as you're not at 0, you're good, right? Like, your health doesn't matter as long as it's not 0.
Yep. It's
and
D&D
that idea,
rules.
right? And like you can, and so I want everyone, if you're having trouble in solo, think of your health and your sanity as that. They are resources you can spend, and as long as they don't hit 0, you're good.
Yep.
But the tricky part is not letting them hit 0. And playing Calvin is a great way to learn this.
Right, exactly. That's so true.
Yeah.
A lot of survivors really teach that lesson well.
Yeah.
I've been doing that a lot with York.
Right, and
and also kind of I
was just going to say, you can spend Doom as long as you don't advance the agenda, right? Like, that's the other side of it. So, anyway, sorry, Ian, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and kind of a partner to that is something I've learned through playing a lot of my beloved low willpower gators is managing that Mythos phase and the encounter cards you draw, specifically the treacheries. In solo especially, I mean, this is generally for Arkham, but I think in solo especially, because you have those 6 resources, but you only have your 6 resources. That you really need to manage those in terms of how you deal with treacheries. Like, be very clear about, it sucks to take horror from this treachery, but is it really worth pitching these particular icons? Because are you going to need this card to get clues or deal with an enemy? You just have to be very careful and particular about how you commit skills to treacheries and which ones are the ones you really need to pass and which ones you can live with, because losing cards from hand can hurt unless you're a heavy card draw investigator, so you gotta make sure you're not giving up stuff. And conversely, on the other hand, sometimes there are very important treacheries you need to pass, and it doesn't help you to say, well, I really need this card for later if this treachery is gonna knock you out and kill you if you don't commit icons. So just be very clear about the consequences of a treachery.
So we kind of talked about deck building in there with the piloting and stuff. But when choosing cards, what makes a good solo card to you guys?
Fast.
You're not wrong.
No.
It's almost like the action is the most valuable currency in the game and can't be properly equated to anything else.
I think, Sean, you were missing when I talked about my 6
correct.
resources of Arkham.
Oh, yes. No, I had to step away real quick. I did miss that.
Well, you can listen to that 5 minutes of pure gold there. So they're not attacks of
I
opportunity.
do agree, actions are king.
Yeah. They're not attacks of opportunity. They're attacks of opportunity.
An opportunity for an attack.
Yes.
I will agree. Like I said, fast, and we're saying like actions are important, but part of that too, and it's our first bullet point on here, is that cards with multiple uses, cards that you can utilize multiple ways, and that's also too. And I know I've kind of given a little bit of grief about this when you guys will be looking at a card that doesn't seem powerful, but then you will defend it and go, yeah, but look at those icons. Like, I may give you grief about that, but especially in solo, that's so true, because even if you don't get that instance when a card is able to be played and able to be used for its text, if it has good icons, if it has a wild and 1 or 2 other icons on it, like, that's still really good. And I think that's the easiest way to find cards with multiple uses in Arkham, is to compare the icons it gives you versus the text that it gives you, and how often are you going to be in a position to where you can use one or the other.
Yeah, and I think like a shining example of these are the rogue favors, where it gives you multiple modes of how to play the cards, plus the icons are double icons of what it does. Like, those cards are just bomb cards for solo, right? Like, it's like, do I need to grab 2 clues? Do I need to grab 1 clue? Do I need to grab 1 clue over there? Or I can just commit it to an intellect test that I need to pass, right? Like, that just, the amount of uses that card has, the amount of potential energy in your hand it has is absolutely incredible.
I think if there's one thing that all of these years of playing solo Lord of the Rings LCG has taught me, it's the value of card draw in solo to increase your consistency. And it's a reason why a card like Mr. Rook is so good, especially in a 30 card deck. Potentially searching through 9 is huge. But he's not the only example. You know, things like Lucky Cigarette Case, these consistent card draw cards that are going to, you may spend an action to play them, but the fact that they're going to keep your engine going and make your decks more consistent is huge. So those are always the kind of card that I look for very early when building a solo deck.
One thing I've come up lately when looking for solo cards and building solo decks is I've started to increase the amount of skill cards I take. And oddly enough, specifically the neutral skills from the base, like from the core set. Because I look at it and I'm like, okay, if I'm Wendy, I'm going to be using evasion, I'm going to be using my intellect, maybe my willpower, like as a defensive skill, but you know, we can talk about that a little later. But if I'm going to be using my intellect and my agility, why not throw perceptions and manual dexterities in there so that I can ensure tests are going to pass, because then I'm conserving my actions, which Sean said is the most important resource of the game, which I generally would agree with. But
generally is all I get, huh? All right, fine. All right, fine.
But like, I mean, you commit those cards and it's a +2, especially on standard. If you're already up by 1, now you're up by 3. Like, it just, you know what I mean? And then it replaces itself in your hand. So you're saving the action by making sure it happens. And then you're also gaining another resource, which is a card, right? Like, those skills are really good. And the other thing about skills in general is there's action compression in some of them, right? Like deduction or vicious blow, as well as they don't need setup. Right. We talked a whole thing about like how big of a rig do you need? Well, maybe your rig, half your rig is in your hand as skill cards, waiting to be used fast, like you said, Nick, right? Because essentially they all have fast. So maybe half your rig is skill cards, and they don't take any time to play.
Yeah. No, definitely. I would totally agree with that. I still, in most decks, in most level 0 decks when I'm starting a campaign, I very often include 2 guts almost regardless of the investigator, just because I know that those are ones that I'm never going to be sad to see in my hand, because the odds of me, like, from the time when I draw them at the end of my turn to when I will need to play them, it's usually a very short time period. Like, it's usually the next Mythos phase. If not, then it's, coming up or whatever. And I think Guts is great for that. I do use Perception and Overpower and Manual Dexterity considerably less, but I still think I can totally agree with you, Scott, in seeing the strength in those, in that they help you succeed and they keep your engine going.
It's funny because I feel like you can kind of trace the development of the Arkham Horror meta and the neutral skills in particular, how they've gone in and out of favor. Because I think early on I was very strongly in favor of them. I had like a Roland heavy skills deck that I was able to get, like the 6 Cultists and Midnight Mass. And then they fell out of favor. I remember talking with you, Scott, about like I include maybe like 4 skills or 6 skills and never the neutrals. And now recently I too have come back around to being like, I should really look at those neutral skills again. So it's funny how they kind of bob in and out of favor over time. But kind of on a different tack, I think this isn't true for all investigators because it depends. But I often look for in a good solo card are those passive skill boosts in key skills, which are obviously gonna increase your odds of success by a good percentage for the whole game as soon as you bump your intellect up by 1 or bump your combat up by 1. That has a huge effect. And any upgraded allies, let's say a Lola Santiago, who are or upgraded Peter, who are boosting more than 1 skill, like those are just worth their weight in gold in addition to whatever bomb effects they have.
I think, Ian, talking about the meta and the skills coming in and out, I think that's also shaped by the campaigns coming out. Like, I feel like the last couple campaigns have gotten much more intense on their action economy, as far as, like, how much can you do, how much can you not, and skills allow you to do things, like you said, Nick, fast. And so, like, when we're in Dunwich, when we're in Carcosa, you kind of were able to have a setup turn or two, so you could run those assets and stuff. And so people cut down on the skills because, a skill card works once, but that magnifying glass is a bad example. Some other, like, takes an action to put down, and it's an asset and it gives you a +1 for every intellect test you're going to take. That lasts forever. And if you have 2 of them out, that's great. If you have 3 of them out, that's great. But it's like, are you going to spend an entire turn, maybe even more, because you have to play the emergency cash to afford them all, right? Like, those skills now are making up for that action deficit that we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah, and it's part of what makes this game so great is constantly evolving your thinking, but just thinking about how I think about skills in my opening hand specifically. Like, we haven't even touched on opening hand that much, and that's like a key decision making in solo, like what you keep and throw away. But I often find myself throwing skills back because I'm like, that's not part of my key rig. But I can clearly think of some games where I'm like, man, like, that manual dexterity was probably as good as any asset in terms of, like, I threw that manual dexterity back, and what did I get in return? I still didn't get that key card I needed. I probably would have been better off keeping that so that I had it as an enemy solution, and it also replaced itself and got me closer to whatever card I wanted in the first place. So those are some things to keep in mind.
Nick, I want to touch on something because I think that you said that, because I think this leads into our next little topic about shoring up weaknesses versus doubling down on your strengths. So you pack guts in a lot of characters as like a defensive thing. I found I don't do that because I just take it on the chin. And I was going to ask you, in your Finn decks, do you run guts?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
That's a wasted card in Finn.
But at the same time, I'm also, if I run Finn, I'm at least 1 Say Your Prayers, if not 2.
Oh no, I do have Say Your Prayers in there. Yeah, I do have that because Finn has such low sanity anyway that he's going to get to desperate relatively quickly, and then and a plus, like getting to 5 will is significant. Getting to 3 will is peanuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So shoring up your weaknesses versus doubling down on your strengths, I think is a very interesting thing to think about when building for solo. I tend to be like, you don't have time or deck space to shore up weaknesses. Like,
not to focus on it.
Right. Like if I'm Ursula or I'm Wendy and they have a 1 in combat, I'm just not using combat.
Right.
Like I'm just accepting that, right? Finn, with willpower, I do have those 2 say your prayers because those can be game savers. But for the most part, I'm like, well, the Mythos phase is just going to happen, and I'm just going to deal with it. But the idea with Finn is you go so fast that hopefully you don't have as many Mythos phases.
Exactly.
Right? And so that's his strength. Ursula's strength is just going fast. Wendy's strength is evading and moving away and succeeding at everything, right?
Yep.
I think shoring up your weaknesses is an easy trap to get into when building a solo deck, and I think it's a dangerous trap.
Unless your weakness is clues and or enemy management. If one of those is your weakness, then you need to shore it up.
That's just what I was going to say. Yeah, I think specifically the clues piece. If my weakness is clues, then I'm probably, like, if you look at a solo Zoe deck that I've built, or a solo Mark, or solo York, anyone, then there's probably a good amount of that deck space is devoted to getting clues, because it's so important. But generally, I agree.
So then, what general advice would we have, or specific advice would we have for people who have never tried solo, Sean?
I have like 3 solo campaigns completed. Thank you very much.
Okay, then for people who we would like to play solo more often, Sean.
Keep playing 2-handed, probably.
Oof.
Okay. So let me try to throw in here, and you guys course correct if need be. I would say when you're first trying out solo, be forgiving of yourself, whether that comes from...
That's just good advice anyway.
Well, I mean, there's that, but I think it applies doubly here, because solo is just... Okay. It's a task. And even if you know the game pretty well in multiplayer, like, it is a different hat to put on. So whether that takes the form of giving yourself a technical cheat in making a poor decision and backing it up and just being like, all right, well, that was a learning experience, or whether that takes the form of playing solo, or whether that takes the form of, maybe modifying your deck mid-campaign because you've learned some things just so you can enjoy it more now. Like, I feel like you got to give yourself a little bit of space to grow into it, because otherwise it can feel really punishing.
That's good.
I'd say just kick yourself off the end of the dock and sink or swim. No, I'm just kidding. I think on that same advice for new people who are first experiencing solo, I think there's a lot of weird decision making changes you need to change in your brain going from solo to multiplayer, and I think we've discussed this for an hour at this point, right? Like, it's a significantly different way to play this game. You know what? For your first time going through solo, play on easy.
Oh yeah,
because it makes things a little bit easier. One house rule I saw someone give their friend who was pretty new to the game and wanted to play solo is, like, just as a super beginner one, is take an extra action every second turn, which I think is like turbo easy, but that's a way to, like, ease up on the stress of the action economy in solo, where you, like, it's always so tight. That is the tightest thing in solo, is how can I get to the end of this game using only the actions I have. And so that's a way to loosen it up a bit. But I think playing on easy also accomplishes that, like, where you learn to move your way through a scenario in a different way, but the tests aren't as stressful.
Yeah. I like that net decking was put on there. Because that was me. Yeah, that's a good one, because it's so, like, I was the kind of person originally, and when I say originally, I mean, I think even, like, before Arkham came out, but just in other card games when net decking was a thing, I was the kind of person where I was like, I don't need a net deck. I know this game. I'm good. I can do this. But that's not, like, net decking isn't something that you should view as you're unable to build a good deck, go find one. It's more like, look at all of these other players who could not, like, you could not have come up with everything that they did. Maybe you came up with a good portion of the same stuff, but you're going to find a deck that did something different or approached something in a different way, and that, just being aware of that is an important resource. So even if you don't copy the deck and use it, just seeing what's out there and seeing what's available to broaden your perspective is really important.
I think one part about net decking too is one of the easiest ways to sink a solo campaign is a bad deck to start.
Oh yeah.
And I think you can win and lose campaigns, especially in solo, with a deck that isn't functioning the way it should be for solo. It's just a different way of building a deck, right? And you stand on the shoulders of giants, find a deck you like, try that out, modify it to your own feeling, but getting the good bones of a deck is super important.
I too like a good bone.
Yeah, I think a couple things there. In addition to a good bone, I also am the kind of player who still to this day I have like too much pride where I'm like, I'm not going to net deck. But one of the things I do often take on when I'm learning a new game is looking at decks. So even if I don't take the deck and play it as is, I just look at how it's built. And especially one of the things I find helpful as a new player to a game is getting some rough guidelines about like how many weapons, how many assets, how many events, how many skills. And as experienced players, we all know that those quote unquote rules to deck building get thrown out all the time because investigators are very different. But I think when you're learning, like, it's one of those things where you got to learn the rules before you break them. So I think it's, you take the very simple and straightforward investigators, don't take on your Prestons and Calvins and your tricky gators, take on your simple roll-ins who are just doing their thing. And just figure out what makes a deck, what are the rough guidelines of, you know, each type of card that are usually included. Try that out, and then once you get some experience, then you can break those rules and adjust the numbers. But I feel like I'm mentioning Lord of the Rings a lot tonight. A lot of drinking. Bring that drinking game back.
No.
But I remember I was struggling to get used to that game, and someone was just like, well, you have, you know, half your deck allies, and then the other 25% is attachments, other 25% is events. Like, obviously that gets broken a ton, but that was so useful for me to just have a simple rule to follow, force my deck into that, to follow those rules, and then later on I could break them. But I think that's a good place to start with Arkham, is just figure out, like, some good starting guides about what you should include in your deck.
Still use that when I'm building for an investigator I'm not familiar with. I think it was Scott was the one who first brought it up on the show, but I still use the 12 assets, 10 events, 8 skills. Like, that's my basis. And then I change it up from there. But, like, if I've, like, especially, I still haven't played Mateo, but when I do, I'm probably going to start with that. So.
Yeah. I find my rule knee-jerk reaction, just off the top of my head right now, for solo is 10-10-10.
Sure.
Ish. And again, that can be broken. But that's, like, if someone were to ask me, gun to my head right now, I'd say 10-10.
And how much of your head is currently occupied by dubs?
92.6%.
That checks out.
Wow,
That
it's down 1.5%.
Yeah. I'd also say choose your campaign wisely. Yeah. Like, if you're just starting solo, don't do TFA. I think the amount of actions needed to explore and all that stuff, like, it just puts a huge tax on actions, especially in solo.
Yeah.
Because of how explore works. I think that's just a bad place to start solo. Honestly, give yourself a softball. I'd say Dunwich or Carcosa. I think both of those are good campaigns to test the waters as far as solo play. Dream Eaters is weird.
I think TFA, I think you're right in that. And TCU, I would venture to say that one is probably a pretty close second for being rough on solo players, not only because of the spikes with like Secret Name and potentially even Wages of Sin, but also just because of because of Haunted, because of failing investigation. Now you have to worry about those things as well. So yeah, I do think that those are the two worst for solo play.
Yeah, and I also think that if you don't have a ton of time, which you might not, or bandwidth as a new player to have like 4 or 5 campaigns going on at once, like use that first scenario of a campaign as a testing ground. Usually it'll give a good indication of how your deck will do. Although the opening scenario might vary in difficulty, but don't be afraid to, maybe you play that first scenario and your deck gets smashed, and make some tweaks to it. Try it again. Try it a third time. Try it a fourth time until you really nail down that deck that you think you like where it's at, rather than just plow ahead. I'm just going to play through the whole campaign, and you're like midway through and realize your deck is terrible. You get
My goodness, what's that like? That happens in multiplayer too, guys. Hate to break it to you.
That's why you got to be like me and just know in your bones that every single deck you make is bad.
I thought you were going the other way with this. They're going to be like, every first draft is fucking playable. Work of art. Go.
No.
I think Trish Neckborough in chat, great name by the way, brings up Dunwich can be a little bit punishing if you don't have higher intellect.
Just in the penultimate scenario.
Just play Return to Where Doom Awaits and fixes it. So, off the top of your head, top 3 investigators you'd recommend for first-time soloers?
Let me scroll back up to my list.
For new players,
Roland.
Roland is a good starting place. Yep.
I think I'd throw obviously Ursula in that list because
Yep.
I think I'd do Ashcan is on that list to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
because he just hits the ground
Ashcan
with everything he
sure.
needs to succeed, pretty much. I want to say Wendy, but I think the use of her ability
it requires some more finesse.
Yeah,
it does. If you've played Wendy multiplayer, I think you can take her solo, but I wouldn't say your first time playing Wendy should be solo. I think you need to understand Wendy a bit more before you take her solo.
Yeah, and I also feel like once you get used to the strategy, the evade gators are super strong solo, but I'm not sure if new players... I think there's a little bit of a learning curve with newer players, like figuring out how that works.
Yeah. Yes, Duke, Roland... Honestly,
Ursula.
That would be my 3, I think.
I would agree.
And I wouldn't say those are my top 3 solo investigators.
Just at this moment.
Total. Yeah, it's just for first-time soloers. I think those are 3 very easy welcome to the party of one person, I guess. Welcome to the loner party. Here's your investigator. I think those 3 are the ones that are easiest to pilot solo. And not saying that... I assume that people who haven't played solo don't know how to play solo or they're dumb or anything. It's just those ones are really approachable. You'll learn how to play solo.
Yeah,
and then from there you can spread your wings. Fly, my pretties. Fly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you guys aren't waiting for me to weigh in, are you?
No, not at all. We're waiting for you to talk about tentacles.
Yeah, I think we're just waiting for that.
Waiting for that easy slide transition that I already fucked up. All right, well, if you haven't played solo, I hope our discussion gave you a decent background for how you might start doing so. And, hopefully if you've played solo, you found something useful in there as well. If you've got any tips, tricks, or ideas, feel free to add them to the ongoing discussion, whether that be commenting on our social media post or shooting us an email or even a voicemail if you prefer. 203-693-5984, I think, is our number.
If you just go to the Facebook page and click Call Mythos Busters.
Oh, yeah, that's hooked up.
It calls it.
That's hooked up. Forgot about that.
Yep.
All right. Well, now that we finally have that topic done and dusted, only 85 episodes too late, let's move it on to a little bit of tentacle time. So this time I'm going to go first and break tradition here. I haven't been doing a whole lot outside of getting outside as much as I can and just generally surviving the crazy times we live in. But as far as other games and fun things that I've done, I finally cracked into Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which so far is pretty good. It's taken a little while for the world to like really open up and become the game that I think it actually is. But it's kind of Assassin's Creed Breath of the Wild would be my first comparison. And again, this is coming from someone who hasn't played an Assassin's Creed game since 3. So, yeah, my opinion should be tempered pretty hard. But it's good. It's Greek mythology. I've already plundered the abandoned palace of Odysseus on Ithaca for relics. So that's fun. I expect at some point there'll be actual mythological creatures that show up. The problem I have is that it has a fully fleshed out open world, including all of the oceans that you might expect of a game that's set in Greek mythology, of the oceans and seas, and they're all diveable, which means there are legitimate, almost guaranteed to be legitimate sea monsters in this game. So I'm just like, every time I go into the water, I'm like, oh, please let the worst thing here be a shark. Please let the worst thing here be a shark. But otherwise, having a good time with it. Like I said, I haven't gotten very far, but it's been a fun little bit of change from the heaviness that have been FromSoft games of late. Nick, how about you?
What have I been doing? Last week was a rough week. I felt a lot of both shame and pride in my home state of Minnesota last week.
Yeah.
Based on all the events that happened. So I sought a pretty good amount of distraction where I could, even though that still ended up multiple nights of me staying up till like 2 a.m. just watching news videos and stuff like that. But anyway, I was able to, I dug a bit more into some PlayStation games. Still playing Cities Skyline. I got a lot of Cities Skylines play last week, I'll tell you what. And then I also re-downloaded Jurassic World Evolution because there's the Jurassic Park DLC that came out, which is it throws back to the original 1993 aesthetic, and it has sound-alikes for a lot of those characters. And that was a nice little just hit of nostalgia that kind of helped a little bit as well. In addition to that, 2 nights ago, we finished our 14th level Tomb of Horrors playthrough on stream, so you can catch that VOD on Twitch, and also you can find that on YouTube. Super fun, really, really fun module. Some very notable holes, some very notable 40-year-old holes, because this module was written in the early 70s or mid-70s. And it has aged thusly, but it was super fun, and I've actually purchased the second edition Return to the Tomb of Horrors, which is a sequel. And I'm wondering, I haven't actually dug into it yet, but I'm wondering how easily I'll be able to adapt that to 5th edition and then run that for the surviving characters. Because that was so fun. And then other than that, I'm prepping for starting a new playtest of the Astral Tides RPG next week, and also prepping for our D&D session on Friday. So that's me.
Nice. Ian, what's been grabbing you lately?
Well, given everything that's happening, I'm dedicating my tentacle time to highlighting a couple of Black lives and Black creatives that are Lovecraft adjacent. So the first one is a book that I've talked about before, which is The Ballad of Black Tom, which was written by Victor Laval, a Black author, and it's probably my favorite kind of Lovecraftian story that I've read. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it basically takes the horror at Red Hook, which is a Lovecraft story, a horribly racist Lovecraft story, and challenges it, turns it around, completely transforms the perspective, and puts a Black protagonist in the center of it. And I love the way that it, taps into the things that we like about Lovecraft while challenging the things that are shitty about Lovecraft, and creates a really good story at the same time. So I highly recommend it. And I'm definitely down to run a book club on it in our Discord if people are interested. So if anyone's interested, hit me up on Discord and we can do this, because I think it's worthwhile to really dig into. The other thing I want to highlight is a supplement for the Call of Cthulhu RPG, which is Harlem Unbound. This was also created by a Black author, Black designer, but he also had lots of other people collaborating with him, so it wasn't just him. And Chris Spivey is his name. And Harlem Unbound, just like it sounds, takes players who are playing a Call of Cthulhu campaign into Harlem in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, which, as a former history teacher and historian, I love that particular period. It's very interesting. But that particular supplement, I think you can read through it not just as an RPG supplement, but there's a whole history section, but also kind of weaving in this Lovecraftian elements that, eldritch beings were around in New York Island before people came. And I think that in itself is just worth a read just as reading material, even if you're not going to run it as a campaign. But I think as an actual campaign supplement, it's also very good and takes a lot of issues of racism and prejudice and actually weaves it into the campaign in a way that's very considered and not just let's throw it in because it's funny or because it's something to add color to the campaign. No, this is someone who actually knows that time period and cares about these issues and has experienced these issues, and so I would love to experience this campaign one day or run it, but I think it's definitely worth checking out even if you haven't. And just the story of the Harlem Renaissance itself is heartbreaking, and the fact that it ends essentially with the Harlem Renaissance ends historically with a riot in Harlem because of an issue with the police is obviously very timely. But anyway, I recommend checking out Harlem Unbound and Ballad of Black Tom, both of those for sure.
Excellent. Scott, take us home.
Well, so I finished the third season of one of my favorite shows of all time, Ozark. Nick, how far are you?
Not there yet.
So, if you like crime dramas that turn your anxiety to about a 12 out of 10 pretty much the entire time you're watching it.
If you like crime dramas that give you indigestion.
I was about to say, I loved the first 2 seasons of Ozark, but shit's riding at too high a temperature right now for me to opt into the stress that show gives me.
Yeah.
I was able to watch this. I finished it 2 weeks after it came out. I just haven't been on a tentacle time for a month and a half. So, but oh boy, and Ozark, every time they end a season, you're just oh my god, what's happening next? Because of what happens in the last part of the last episode. It's just, it is such a good show, but oh my god, it is exhausting to watch in a very good way somehow. But just, honestly, if you watch the first 2 episodes, you'll get a feeling of the pacing of the show and the just the
first, just literally the pilot.
Yeah.
That pilot is so...
Probably the first couple scenes of the pilot, you'll know about the temperature you're going to be riding at.
Literally just the cold open.
Yeah.
The title sequence!
Oh.
Just read the name. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Anyways, you guys have heard this tentacle time, so you get it now.
The other thing is, so my son is starting to, he's 4, and he's starting to actually be able to play video games a little bit. He'll play Mario Odyssey. He can run, he can jump, he can't really accomplish much, but he loves just running around and stuff. But he does like watching me play video games, so I'm very particular about what I choose, obviously. So Mario is a good option.
Or
but
Hatred.
one game or Bloodborne, it's fine. Dark Souls, I'm sure.
Yes,
I'd show him
fully.
Good reactions to that. Yeah. So I bought a game that I'm realizing now, as I'm entering technical time now, because I planned to say this about a month and a half ago. It's Lego City Undercover, where you're playing a cop.
You're right. We were all talking about that 2 months ago.
I think it's
more about the recent events. Yeah, you're playing as a cop, and it's
but you're a fantasy cop, so
yeah. And it's Lego. Anyways, it came out in 2013, which I didn't realize, and it got ported to Switch in 2017. But I was looking, like, I was like, I've played a bunch of Lego games, and this one was like open world. I'm like, sweet, sounds great. It's a lot of fun. If for the last 7 years you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. It's an open world Lego game where you're an undercover police officer, like, and it goes very light on the police. Like, at some point you're in a mine, you're throwing dynamite and stuff. Like, you're not really a cop, but you're a cop. And yeah, it's super fun. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. If you like the Lego games and you want an open world Lego game, yeah, it has tons of stuff to unlock, which is going to be the death of me. Because I like to 100% games and
100%.
Yeah. My Zelda game is still sitting at 899 Korok seeds because the app I used to track it, I must have clicked a Korok seed at some point, and I don't feel like remapping out 899 Korok seeds to find the last one, but it's just sitting there in my mind grinding at me.
Oh, God.
Is the last thing I have to do to 100% the Zelda game.
Scott, I'm your friend and you don't. I promise you don't.
No, I really...
100%.
Shut up, Nick!
100%.
No.
Platinum.
I hate you all.
Platinum.
The thing is, it doesn't even give you anything.
It doesn't. It just takes
it gives
time
you golden
away from your
Korok
life.
poop.
Golden Korok poop. Oh, yay.
You did? Yeah. So... yeah, anyways, watch Ozark and then play Lego City Undercover to wind down after watching Ozark.
And pretend you're Jason Bateman from Ozark while you're playing Lego City.
Oh, God.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
All right. Yes, hide all those studs in fake accounts and launder the rest, and everything will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Until it's not, which is Ozark. All right, well... thank you, everyone, for joining us on episode 85 of Mythos Busters. We'll have to catch you guys next time. Which will probably be 86, I think.
I mean, we're on track for it. Bye.
Bye.
I love how Ian couldn't even muster up a bye for that one. He's just like, God, you guys are dumb.